Hi, my name's Annie Stone, and I'll be doing my first assignment for the subject Social and Cultural Context of Education. So today my presentation will be on the 3 chapters out of the book Education, Change and Society, which are social, class and inequality, cultural difference and identity, and gender. So all of these we've been studying in Module 1. I am a music and singing teacher myself, so all of these issues that I will be raising will be highly revolved around my area in this and my own personal and professional teaching. I found these chapters actually really quite interesting, and I was able to take a lot from each of them. I have around 4 issues that I wanted to bring up today. Some of them are more important than others in my opinion, but I will try to clearly describe each of them for you. So the first one that has been an ongoing issue for as long as I can remember, going back even when I was at school about 10 years ago, and I don't really see it changing anytime soon, which actually is quite a shame. So in the chapter Social Class and Inequality, it basically talks about social stratification and the division of groups based on where they stand socially, where students' socioeconomic status is and their wealth, etc., that sort of thing. And then it talks about where there's advantages and disadvantages students. In today's society, we basically have public schools versus elite private schools, in my opinion. So going back to music, majority of schools have a music department, which is fantastic. They have music programs, and pretty much all of them have the opportunity for students to have music lessons outside class. So I think that's really, really, really great. However, my main issue here is the divide between high opportunities because of wealth and money. So most private schools have more money and therefore they have a better music department. This then means that there are better musical opportunities and they offer a higher range of instrument choices to learn. They have bigger and better music auditoriums, and usually they actually have one-on-one music lessons opposed to group music lessons, which most public schools have. It is pretty fair to say that not every family can afford to put their child into a private schooling system, and therefore so many talented music students are disadvantaged by not having the same privileges that wealthy students have, which actually is such a shame. Once again, it also can relate to the cost of music instruments. So instruments cost a lot. So wealth and upper class families, they also have an advantage there as well. I went to a public school, and I honestly do believe that I was disadvantaged in some areas, not everywhere, but while other private schools around my area, they were doing larger musicals every year, and I was at a school, that didn't really do that, and they had bigger and better music departments, and they also had massive auditoriums where they did these musicals. So just little things like that. So this is quite a personal issue, as I have completed 2 instrumental placements during my course at Melbourne Uni as well, and I was placed in both a private and a public school. And the difference was absolutely incredible. The facilities at the private school was just absolutely crazy, and every single student got a single one-on-one lesson. And as much as I enjoyed being a student teacher at the public school as well, the music department wasn't as big, and all the lessons were group lessons, and the camps were held at the school, and money was very limited. Coming from a teacher's stand and point of view, I think that every student should get the same opportunities, especially if they are musically talented, and there shouldn't be this block because of wealth and upper class. This chapter really helped me understand this issue in a few ways, and one was when Pat Thompson's book Schooling the Rust Belt Kids was spoken about. So, excuse me. So basically, it looked at 2 students with very different backgrounds, and they both had this virtual school bag. So one had come to Australia from a different country. He had a interest in music because his dad was a musician. He spoke a few languages and etc. And the other one was a good listener, loved being read to, loved watching TV, etc. So this helped me understand that every student will have a different virtual school bag with different interests and talents. And in order to help our students to their full potential, we actually do need to understand these personal talents and come up with numerous pedagogical ways in our teaching that will help their learning. So even without the expensive things and higher opportunities that these private schools can give, this is the way in which we will advantage these students. So on to my second issue that I want to speak about. We are always going to get students with different cultural backgrounds and identities. And in music class or in any class in general, this is going to happen. So it is important to take into consideration. And in the chapter Cultural Difference and Identity, it really talks a lot about this. So once again, while on placement for the University of Melbourne, there were a few students in the school choir that didn't speak much English and found it difficult to understand what we were learning. So that was a real curveball. I do know in a lot of music curriculum in high schools that they do spend a lot of time learning about Indigenous music and other music history regarding other cultures and where they arose from, although I don't believe that there is enough teaching regarding other cultural music in the theory-based areas. So, for example, pretty much all of the music we listen to and learn about is westernized music. Things like a major scale, for example, which is normal to us and is tuned in the way that we believe is right. But what if a student came from India and their tuning and the idea of a scale was completely different to ours and how we play music? So I feel like this student would find it extremely difficult and will probably get very little out of the curriculum and will most likely negatively affect their learning in some way. Which then again, it could also relate back to the inability to use creativity in the classroom. And also, most of the time, music in high school is an elective, so we don't want multicultural students dropping out of music because they can't connect to it on a personal and creative basis, which is a shame as well. This chapter also talked about schools having a decline in learning other languages and other cultured students finding it hard to only learn and speak English at school when their primary language is spoken at home by their parents, which did put a strain on their relationship. So this could also happen within music class if we aren't careful as well. This chapter helped me tremendously in this whole area, and in a professional stance, I do believe that we need to be teaching all types of music in not only history but theory too. Maybe this can't be realistic in the time constraints that we have at school while we teach, but even if there are certain students in the class with different cultural backgrounds, we should even just take their culture into consideration and teach that. We could also do things like personal development sessions, and even getting student inputs on what they want to learn about as well could actually be really useful and really good. So another issue around the same chapter that I came across was language barriers. So an issue in going back to music is when learning theory and history, all students need to be able to understand the content and what is being taught in order to move forward and learn to their full potential. So understanding and respecting language barriers need to be considered. And I wouldn't even take the time to have one-on-one time with the students that need it after class so they can fully understand what's being taught. I also found an article by Carlos Abril called Breaking the Language Barriers in Music Instruction, which I found really, really interesting and helpful for this assignment. So I wanted to share a few things in which I found really useful. So some tips for working with English language learners. So we need to recognise that all children are cognitively, linguistically, and emotionally connected to the language and culture of their home. We also need to acknowledge that children can demonstrate their knowledge and capabilities in many ways. So students, we all know students aren't silly. They can learn, but they just need to learn in their own way. We also need to understand that without comprehensible input, secondary language learning can be difficult. Another thing to really take into consideration that is extremely important. We also need to support and preserve home language usage. So going back to that connection that the students have with their parents at home, we really want to preserve and support that. And develop and provide alternative and creative strategies for young children's learning. That's also going back to that virtual school bag. So every student's different. Every student's going to have different talents in this virtual school bag. So we need to be bringing out different ways and creative strategies to teach these students and improve their learning, especially if English isn't their first language. Okay, going on to the gender chapter. So the last issue that I wanted to speak about, and this one I am actually really extremely passionate about, is the impact that gender has on instrument choice in schools and in society, basically in general. So being a music teacher, this is so relevant, and it is happening in every school, and it happened at me when I was at school also. So when I was younger, I was embarrassed to learn guitar at school because I thought it was a boy instrument and I'd get teased. So this is where my exact issue stems from: gender stereotyped instruments. The gender chapter refers to gender issues such as males having this idea of what characteristics a real man should have, and vice versa with how females should be acting feminine, and that sort of thing. So in today's society, and as a music teacher, I actually am struggling to find ways in which to help this issue. So students have this idea that there are certain instruments that only girls should play and certain instruments that only boys should play. Instruments such as the flute, violin, piano, singing are girl instruments, and the drums, guitar, bass, trombone, etc. are all boy instruments. So why can't a boy play the flute and a girl play the drums without getting stereotyped? So if basically the boy is seen as a homosexual and the girl is seen as masculine or as a lesbian, all because of an instrument choice, which is just ridiculous. This gender issue then can cause mental health issues and bullying at school, which is also stated in another article I'd found called Instrument Selection and Gender Stereotypes, causing students to choose instruments that are socially acceptable rather than the ones that they want to. They are caught between silencing and themselves and denial, so they aren't bullied. And it's known that boys actually get it worse than girls in this situation. And another personal example that I can give is that at all the placements for singing teaching that I've had, I've taught 90% girls and only 10% boys in voice lessons. So it is actually such a challenge as a music teacher to deal with this issue and get students away from this stereotype. But the chapter actually really helped me understand that boys do need help in this area more than girls, and that students need to start looking beyond these limitations because of certain stereotypes. And this chapter made me think about ways in which I could help motivate students to choose the instruments they want. So these include things like having music days where we get in both gender role models on all instruments to play for the students. So getting a female playing the bass or getting a male playing the violin, so it becomes normalised for the students. So this could even happen for the entire school, so it also becomes normalised for non-music students as well to help eliminate bullying. Music class could also consist of the use of technology by showing videos of all gendered instruments players as well. And although this will be a long process as this issue is extremely large, little ideas like this could help the situation even if it's just a little bit. And I would also think it's a good idea to get the parents on board as well, have meetings and de-stereotype this for them too. Support is key in this issue, I believe, at home and at school. So all of this is just so important. So that concludes all of my issues, but overall this text helped me tremendously in thinking at a deeper level professionally and personally. I was able to identify issues that are happening in my own teaching as a music teacher and in ways in which I could start to help within my own classroom, which is really great. And there are also so many other issues out there, but these are the few ones that really stood out for me on a personal and professional level. I also hope this helps other music teachers out there like me grasp onto these ideas. Thanks for listening, and these are my references.